Is it working? I am sharing my screen. Cool. Great. Awesome. Thank you again for having me, Customario, and especially Naomi. My name is Maggie Glascott. I am the Senior Email Marketing Manager at Buffer, which is a social media toolkit for small businesses and individual creators. I joined the team about 5 months ago, but today I'm going to share with you how I was able to identify and execute on some quick wins within my first few months in this role. But first, who is she? Like many of you, I fell into email marketing. For me, it was by way of sales planning and account management turned editorial marketing at Zillow's New York City real estate brand, StreetEasy. In this editorial marketing role, I began helping StreetEasy's CRM team of one with the weekly marketing newsletters, eventually transitioned to a full-time email marketing role encompassing, triggered lifecycle emails, which is where I really learned the fundamentals of email marketing. And after about 4 years in email marketing at StreetEasy, I joined Duolingo as their first ever email marketing manager, a time I will refer to here as my email marketing teen years, partially for the sake of my metaphor of going from a little BB to a teen, but partially because this was my first time working with a homegrown email platform, the majority of which did not have any front-end UI. So it was certainly a bit angsty at times. And after about 4.5 years at Duolingo, I left to join another ed tech startup as director of CRM, was laid off 3 months later, and a few months after that, joined Buffer as senior email marketing manager. And so now that I'm in this, relatively mature stage of my email marketing career, my 30 flirting and thriving, if you will, I wanted to share how I approached my first 90 days in this newest role. So first up, establishing trust. Breaking this down into a few segments. Number one, go on a listening tour, AKA just talk to people in different departments. So when you join a new company, typically your manager will have a list of people they want you to meet with within your first 30 to 90 days. If your company has a customer support team and they're not on that list, I strongly recommend that you make a point to chat with them within your first month. These are the people that are really on the front lines. They're most familiar with user pain points and confusion. And I found that they often have a more comprehensive knowledge of a company's email program than most people. So obviously, anyone else closely tied to your role or that your manager wants you to chat with, you should reach out to. I just like to call out CS because I think it's important as email marketing managers for us to have close relationships with support teams. Next, making sure you know your company's North Star metrics. So what are the key actions that you want users to take in their first 7, 14, 30 days with the product? What metrics do leaders at the company monitor every day? And what mechanics do we currently have in place to grow those? And not just on a company level, but a team level. So when you're speaking to product managers or customer support, what are those teams' indicators for success? I mentioned that Buffer is a social media toolkit. So some of our North Star metrics are things like social media channel connections, post-sent events, and to a lesser extent, subscription conversions to a paid tier, because Buffer is a freemium product. But as a business, we put a lot of focus on the free tier, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about channel connections and post-sent events throughout this presentation. Next, ask questions. So ahead of meeting with people, make a list of questions related to those North Star metrics. Are there any insights around existing features or initiatives that help drive them already? And that sounds obvious, but make sure you actually understand everything that you're hearing in these discussions. So sometimes when we're new, we want to make a good impression or we just want to keep the conversation moving. It's okay to stop and ask for clarity. If you're worried about interrupting someone's flow, take notes throughout, and then you can come back to those at the end. And then lastly, showcase your expertise by educating. So this is particularly important in instances where email marketing is a new function at the company. One of the initial conversations with my manager was that a priority he wanted my role to tackle was an email templating system. So like an overall redesign, they had an existing email program in place, but the formatting was inconsistent and the designs were outdated. So during my listening tour, I met with our marketing designer and from the jump, made sure she understood that, email HTML is very much stuck in the 90s and kind of like set expectations around the limitations there. And luckily, when I was at Duolingo, there was a lot of focus on making our emails as delightful as the in-app experience. So I had already created a pretty robust one-sheeter for the designers there, focused specifically on HTML and mail client nuances for them to keep in mind when they were designing. I actually have it here if you want to take a screenshot. It's also posted to my LinkedIn. If you want to snag it from there, it might be a little bit better quality. So I had shared a version of this email design cheat sheet in Notion with Buffer's marketing designer after our discussion to help streamline her redesign work. So this way she's not bogged down in the details of a button shadow when we know it's not going to render for Gmail users anyway. So any resources like this that you've taken the time to create in the past can be repurposed, and this will help you showcase your expertise. And it's also going to help streamline processes, which will in turn build trust. So now that we have established trust and context, let's start making an impact. First and foremost, conducting an email audit. Again, going to break this down into a few components. So taking inventory of every single email you're sending. I think it helps to categorize these, so transactional, onboarding, etc. Or create a user journey map. You can see here, maybe it's bad quality, but you get the idea, kind of like a flow chart of emails. If your company uses growth model labels, it can also be really helpful to create a table kind of showcasing which emails each segment is eligible to receive. And this is particularly helpful to identify gaps in the email lifecycle. So this will help you hone in on quick wins. If you find an area where you can go from 0 to 1, that's a pretty big win. Not that the answer is already know that. Next up, looking at least the last 3 months worth of sends to take stock of monthly send volume, open, click, bounce, unsubscribe, all of that. And looking at the trend of open and click rates over time is also crucial for getting a pulse on your deliverability health. So really good to have that baseline check. And this will also help you identify some quick wins. So if you see your welcome email click-through rate is super low, you pull it up and you see the button is way below the fold, boom, that's a very quick win for you. Lastly, identifying the most common email journeys for key user segments. So you are in a unique position, you're examining these flows with fresh eyes, you might be the only source of in-house expertise. You can kind of narrow down what is the email flow that most users are getting. Does it make sense? Is each email achieving its own down funnel objective? And from here, we're going to hone in on some quick wins. So when I performed this exercise, it was very clear to me that the biggest areas of opportunity were for new and dormant users. And dormant is defined in Buffer terms as users who have not posted in the last 7 days, but have posted in the last 28. And you can see these, this is a snippet of our onboarding flow here on the left. We're all email marketers here, so I don't need to tell you that the onboarding series is super important. And we probably are all having the same thought about why is that button so far below the fold? Additionally, the onboarding series was very long, like in terms of the content itself, the email itself was super long. And one of the most valuable and possibly discouraging lessons that I've learned working in email is that people don't read. So definitely saw an opportunity to cut emails in half, basically across the board. And then in looking at each of the emails individually, the content itself was not really optimized to get users to perform the key actions that we wanted them to, like in their first, couple weeks. So there was big opportunity there as well. And then the other group that I mentioned was dormant users. As I mentioned in the audit process, looking at the most common email journeys for key user segments can help you identify gaps. And that's what happened here. So I took stock of everything we were sending users by growth model label. And you can see there were no existing emails in place to prevent users from becoming dormant or churning. But I'm a big believer in kind of nipping the dormant in the bud before it turns to churn. But we can maybe cover that in Q&A or something. So when it comes to which to tackle first, that's going to, vary by person. Mine was determined by a mix of business priorities, team goals, and luckily my own personal philosophy. So in this case, my manager had already identified onboarding as a priority. And this just so happened to fall in line with my own philosophy when I enter a new role, which is to focus on improving the existing journey before implementing new touch points. So this is not always the right answer, but just giving context as to how I ended up prioritizing this, because some may argue that the dormant user was actually maybe lower, like bigger impact. Again, we can discuss this in Q&A. So next, it's time to execute. I'm going to take a sip of water because I've been talking a mile a minute. Okay, so I was able to make changes iteratively to our onboarding series rather than having to wait to rewrite content for every single email and implement it once. I feel very lucky that I was able to do this. Your company may have stricter outlooks on experimentation, so this might not be an option for everyone. But luckily, Buffer is a very small, fast-moving team. And we've taken this iterative approach in other areas, like we did a whole website redesign where we did one page at a time. So this approach worked for us. So what does this iterative approach mean? Basically, I started with the lowest hanging fruit. So in Buffer's case, this were people who had not yet connected a channel. And then I followed up with experiments aimed at people who had connected a channel. Again, these are social media channels, but had not yet posted. So the initial MVP experiments, what I'm calling them, I focused on getting users to connect a channel. So I mentioned filling gaps. You can see here on the left, there's a snippet of our trial onboarding series. So when I joined, if a user had not yet connected a social media channel by day 3 of their trial, we just stopped emailing them. Obviously, there is clear opportunity here to email those users to encourage them to connect a channel and make the most of their trial period because they can't take advantage of any of their premium features without taking that first step to connect. Secondly, I just optimized a bunch of layouts. So streamlining the existing content to maximize engagement is another way to garner a really quick win. Here I have the example of our welcome email for free signups who had not yet connected a channel. And so just by condensing this, reformatting the content, obviously moving the button above the fold, my favorite quick win, increased channel connection from open rate by 25%. And then the next round of experiments focused on improving the relevance of messaging and increasing metrics further down the funnel. So for our free onboarding series, that meant getting users who connected a channel to post to that channel. And for our trial onboarding series, we wanted to get people to post, but we really wanted to increase subscription conversion because that's really that like North Star metric for that flow, right? So the example I have here is it was this one size fits all sort of approach to our day 4 email during the trial onboarding series. And when I came in, it was highlighting one of our free features. And again, I'm in a gorgeous community of fellow like-minded email marketing geniuses. So you all know, like onboarding series engagement typically decreases with each send. So I wanted to focus on emphasizing the value of their paid features early on. So here I shifted the content and I focused on our premium engage feature, which allows you to engage with comments to your Instagram and Facebook channels directly in Buffer. So for this experiment, I added a check to see whether a user had Instagram or Facebook connected. This is only available on those channels, but Unpacked exclusive. It's coming to Threads soon. If you don't have Instagram or Facebook connected and you're on day 4 of your trial, you will be prompted to connect one of these channels so that you can take advantage of one of your premium features. And if you did have one of these channels connected, we would instead drive directly to the feature to drive discovery and adoption. Improving the relevancy of messaging here and focusing on a premium feature earlier in the flow garnered an increase in subscription conversions and other key actions over the control. So you can see here, the one that focused on channel connection, increase in channel connection, the one that was driving them to create a post, yes, so you get it. Okay, Results. So I ultimately conducted 15 experiments to fill gaps, optimize content, and improve the relevancy of messaging in our free onboarding series. And so you can see the increases to our, some of our North Star metrics that I've been mentioning here. The stats here are specifically for the free onboarding series. Our trial onboarding series has a longer conversion window. The results there are looking quite positive as well for subscription start from open rate, but they're not quite ready, which I'll tell you about on the next slide. One of the reasons why I'm not quite ready to share results. Learnings. So conducted all of these experiments, got some quick wins. Great. What else happened? We learned that streamlining existing content with the goal of focusing on a single objective per email showed significant improvements to North Star metrics. This kind of, I feel like, is email marketing 101, but still good to keep in mind that it is, maybe it's not always going to be the case depending on your industry or whatever company you've joined. But for me, this has always sort of proven true. So consolidating copy, moving CTAs above the fold, incorporating product imagery, just making content more digestible, skimmable, engaging, increased key action from open rate. And then next up, keep it simple. So more often than not, introducing net new content added some unnecessary complexity. There were instances where I tested entirely different sets of content, like a different product feature, against the control, which meant I had to also adjust future emails in the flow to account for potential duplicate information. And it just got very complex. And if I could do it again, I would just streamline all existing content to start off and test new content as a fast follow. And as an aside, if I had done this in the first place, I would have those comprehensive trial onboarding results to share with you. But I've had to rerun so many experiments because of the unnecessary complexity that I added, just getting all ahead of myself and excited about the potential of new content. So just keep it simple, especially in your first, 90 days. You don't need to be doing the best case scenario, most personalized. But personalizing content to user behavior did boost key action from open rate. This is unsurprising. I did like the hot takes in the last session about, is personalization overrated? I kind of was waffling back and forth about that on my own. But I do think that tailoring messaging based on what key actions a user has or has not already taken increase key action from open rates. So we saw this here. It was between 11 and something like 80% per email. So that was a big improvement. I also think that tailoring that messaging can be as simple as just different CTA copy. So just connect a channel versus create a post. But my tip for you here is to always be very actionable. So one example for Buffer, I updated a CTA from start growing your brand to plan your weekly content. And that increased click-through rate by nearly 300%. So, planning weekly content is much more tangible than the abstract concept of growing your brand, which was why I think that had such big results. And lastly, some of the experiments that I launched were neutral. And as long as they didn't show any statistically significant harm to metrics, and I believed it improved the user experience, I launched it. Again, very lucky that I had the freedom to do this. Like, Buffer's great, and they trust me to do this. But for our trial onboarding series in particular, some changes had a neutral impact on subscription conversion, but increased the rate of key actions like channel connections or post sent. So because this, ultimately helps increase usage of the product, which we hypothesize will increase the likelihood of conversion at the end of the trial, or maybe even just eventually, we launch these. And so this brings me to a lovely recap. If you're working from home and you've been doing dishes, listening to me like a podcast, this is the TLDR for you. The 4 ways to drive results fast. I'm going to take a sip again. I'm losing my voice. Okay. Establishing context. Meet with stakeholders to listen, ask questions, gather insights, and align on North Star metrics. conduct a thorough audit of your existing emails, their performance, and the most common user journeys with email. And that will help you identify your biggest opportunities and get a read on baseline performance, including that deliverability pulse check. Prioritize the opportunities by lowest lift and highest impact to identify and implement your quick wins. And then implement those wins as multivariate experiments so you can measure down funnel impact. You always want to be able to measure your email changes against some sort of control. So whether it's, the original version of the email or a holdout group or both. And then from there, you can conduct iterative experiments based on these initial learnings. And with that, I think that's all I got. And it was so tempting to read the chat, but I didn't want to get distracted. Oh, thanks, Naomi, for sharing. Actually, I'm doing the dishes. I love that. I love that for you. I love a productive conference chore duo.
Multitasking at its finest. We've had a couple of questions come in. People are really interested in just DMing me from Email Geeks. I don't know why. I appreciate it, but you can post the questions in the chat. Okay, so we had this question. Did you know about some of the items that would be on your listening tour before you joined the role? What level of context did you have about the tasks and challenges before you joined?
That's a great question. So no, I didn't get any sort of like context on who I was going to work super closely with until I joined. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but if I stop presenting, because I just find this GIF to be quite distracting.
Oh, yes. Let me get rid of it.
Oh, okay. Because I remember when I didn't want to ruin anything accidentally. Thank you. Yeah. So it was really once I joined and then saw Buffer has this really awesome onboarding program, I was so pleasantly surprised by because it's a very small company and there's no HR department. But so I basically had like a 30, 60, 90-day outline of objectives to meet and like people to meet with. But none of that was really covered before I joined. And customer support was not actually on the list of people. But I'm a big CS lover. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answered the question in full. Sorry. If it's in the QA section, I can also.
Okay, cool. I think it does. I also have to echo what you've said about CS. They are like the best people to go talk to about learnings and what gaps exist in emails currently. So if anyone is looking to build a new relationship internally, CS is where you should start.
Okay.
Okay, we've got this one here. Redesign templates or copywriting? Which comes first, or do you tackle both at the same time?
I love this question. So I'll always start with copy and be like, this copy is so good. It's incredible. And then I put it into the new template that I sort of have envisioned. And then I'll think, oh, no, it's too long. Or this button copy is actually not super clear or actionable and it's like too vague. So I do kind of tackle them at the same time. But really it's starting with the copy. And then once you put it in the template, kind of refining from there.
That makes sense. A little bit of both. And then we've got this fun one here, which is an interesting one. How do you build trust with stakeholders and teams while implementing changes? Because sometimes you can enter a new role and people can be really attached to the things that exist currently, right? Like you don't want to rock the boat.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've definitely come across this. I feel like we all have as email marketers, we know what's going to perform and we know what's going to actually drive the metric that they want to drive, but there's for some reason just a resistance to that. I am always a big proponent of just like test. And I feel like this comes up at every email conference I've ever heard of. It's like, it's always the answer. It's like, just test and let the numbers prove them wrong because we're not wrong. But really though, that's kind of like how I like to go about things. And if there's resistance to testing, I think that's probably a bigger issue.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree.
I also think, and sorry to, I'm just going back to it because I'm reading the question again, like, how do you build trust? So not just like, how do you prove them wrong? I'm already going to a place of proving them wrong. But in terms of building trust, I think also kind of the example that I showed with the designer, like I clearly, like, I sort of know what I'm talking about. I've come across this before. Like we really stretched the limits at Duolingo with what email could do because we really wanted to make it as fun as the app. And so just like kind of showing that expertise, taking the time to really educate versus just saying like, I know this is going to perform better.
Yeah, yeah, that one hurts to hear. But it's so true. Okay, well, thank you so much, Maggie, for joining us.
No, it's my
I again
pleasure.
like have a little button that people can click. Hold on. Studio. There's a little button at the bottom, Maggie's LinkedIn post.
Ah,
Um, so if you don't want to go and click the link that I dropped in the chat, you can go find Maggie on LinkedIn via the fun CTA that I set up.
yeah.
And I love reading your content on LinkedIn, so please
Oh
don't
my
ever stop.
gosh, thanks. That's
No
so
problem.
sweet. Yeah, and if anybody asked a question that I didn't answer, feel free to just message me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your
Thank you.
day.
Thanks for having me. You too.